go. Good morning, everybody from Australia, and welcome to another Modern Astrology Planets workshop. And this workshop, we're looking at the planet Venus, which we were just talking about this before the session started. Venus for me is a very, very important planet. It's my chart ruler. It's in the 8th house in Capricorn, which is an interesting placement. My chart is a bucket chart, and the handle of that bucket is Saturn in the 12th house. So I guess that just amps that energy up, or it makes it even more confusing to work with, I guess. But, you know, Venus is a planet that's always been very, very important for me, astrologically, shall we say. Okay, just a quick overview of what we're looking at today. Normally, in terms of mythology, what I've done in the past is I've looked at different gods from different pantheons. And there's always been, you know, similar gods in almost every pantheon around the world has reflected the energy of a particular planet. What I thought I'd do this time is have a look at a book called the Aeneid. Has anybody read the Aeneid? It's by a Roman author. His name is Virgil. Everybody's familiar with Homer's book, The Odyssey, the story of King Odysseus. Everyone's heard of that? Yeah. After the fall of Troy, it chronicles the story of Odysseus, one of the Greek kings who laid siege to Troy, his attempted return back to Greece, which took years. And, you know, he went through struggles and trials in order to do that. The Aeneid is almost the same book written from a completely different perspective. It's the chronicle of the Trojans after the fall of Troy. And it chronicles the story of King Aeneas after Troy falls, and he makes his way through 7 years of trials and struggle. And I thought the reason that I thought we'd have a look at this is because this, for me, opened my eyes up about the god Venus. I've always thought of Venus, at least when I first started astrology, as, you know, you see those paintings by Botticelli of the beautiful, lazy, self-indulgent Venus, you know, reclining or eating grapes or standing there on a some sort of scallop shell while she's worshipped by all these other smaller godlings. The Aeneid flipped the script for me, and it gave a completely different perspective on the goddess Venus. And what that did for me is it also built a bridge for the perception of Venus from the esoteric astrology point of view. Suddenly it made a lot more sense. So I thought I'd share a bit of that today. We're going to look at rulership. We'll take a look at esoteric astrology. We'll look at how Venus may express in a sign, and we'll look at aspects, how Venus in aspect to other planets can express, both easy and hard aspects. We'll take a look at retrograde Venus, how it may express as well, and we'll wrap up by looking at different ways to manifest Venus. We did this last time, you remember? We looked at Gemini. Sorry, not Mercury, and different ways to manifest more Mercury energy into your life as well. So we're going to do that this session. Does anybody have any questions about that or anything that they want to say? Okay, let's step forward. Okay, Venus. Venus in the Aeneid. Well, this story begins with, I'm just going to give a very quick overview of the Aeneid. The story begins with 3 goddesses sitting in a room, chilling, doing whatever it is that goddesses do, talking about whatever it is that goddess is talking about. And then all of a sudden, somebody throws a gold apple into the room, and written on the surface of the apple are the words, "For the fairest." So immediately, what begins as a discussion turns into a debate, turns into an argument, and then turns into a full and screaming match as these 3 goddesses are trying to decide which of the 3 of them are the fairest and deserve to have this apple. After a lot of fighting and dispute, they finally decide that the best way to solve this problem is to find a mortal and bring him up to Olympus and get him to give his verdict on who's the most beautiful of the 3 of them. So these goddesses go down to Troy, and they find Paris, who's the younger brother of the crown prince of Troy. They bring him up to Olympus and they explain the situation to him. They explain to him that they want him to tell them who the fairest, the most beautiful of the 3 goddesses is. They explain there'll be no repercussions, and nobody's going to try and sway his opinion. So he spends a bit of time with them talking to these goddesses and asking them questions and doing whatever it is he needs to do to gain information. And then he heads back to Earth to make his decision. Of course, one by one, these goddesses go to him privately and try and change his opinion, you know, win him over by offering him different things. The first goddess to go down is Hera, the goddess of power, of unadulterated female power. She's the wife of Zeus. Even Zeus is terrified of her. She's the absolute personification of power. And she goes to Paris and she says, Paris, if you choose me, if you say that I'm the most beautiful of the three, I will give you power, a type of power that no mortal has ever wielded before. It will be uncontrollable, irresistible power. You'll get whatever you want, you know. And Paris hears this and thinks, wow, you know, somebody's going to have to work really hard to beat this offer. A little while later, the second goddess goes down to him, and this is the goddess Athena, the goddess of war, wisdom, strategy. She says to him, Paris, if you choose me as the most beautiful goddess, I will give you the absolute dominant strategy in war. You'll be undefeatable, both in combat, in discussion and debate. You will always have a plan that will always come through for you. You will always win, you know. And Paris thinks about this and thinks, wow, that sounds amazing. You know, that's right up there with that, what Hera was offering. So he's sitting there struggling with decision when the third goddess comes down, and that goddess is Venus. And Venus says to him, Paris, if you choose me, I will give you the hand of the most beautiful woman in the world. She will fall in love with you. You know, you'll be irresistible to her. You know, and he thinks about it, and it's compared to the other two, it's a little underwhelming. You know, he could have absolute power, or he could have, you know, absolute dominance in battle and conflict and at every level. But the more he thinks about the first two, his mind keeps going to the third one, and he keeps thinking, you know, I wonder what she looks like. She must be beautiful. You know, for Venus herself to come down and say, you know, I'll give you the hand of the most beautiful woman in the world, she must be pretty amazing. And the more he thinks about the first two, he finds his mind constantly pondering what the most beautiful woman in the world might look like. Eventually they bring him back to Olympus and they ask him for his verdict. And he says, the most beautiful of the goddesses is Venus. You know, and the goddesses accept their verdict. They have to. But, you know, obviously two of them aren't happy about them. What Venus didn't explain to Paris was that the most beautiful woman in the world was married. She was married to a Greek king. And when Paris meets Helen of Troy for the first time, she falls head over heels in love with him. And when he goes back to Troy, she jumps on the boat. She doesn't even think about it. And that launches a 7-year war where the Greeks sent their entire army over. They surrounded the city and they laid siege to it. For 7 years, Venus interfered with every attack, every divine intervention that Hera could throw against that. An interesting thing was Hera, every god or goddess had a city of their own that was precious and important to them. And for Hera, her city was Carthage on the North African coast. Queen Dido was very, very close to her heart, and she had heard a prophecy from the fates that eventually the Trojans would lay waste to Carthage. So she saw this as an opportunity to kill a threat before it even became a threat. After 7 years, it's history. The Trojan horse is created, a plan is built around that. The Greeks enter the city, and in the night, a 7-year siege ends. They lay absolute waste to Troy, and Troy falls. King's decapitated, his body's left on the beach, and Aeneas and a group of survivors jump into a bunch of ships and they flee. And this is where the real story starts, because the first thing Hera does when she sees his ships is she orders Poseidon to go in and destroy these ships. So Venus goes to Aeolus, the god of the wind, and she seduces him into creating a great wind that blows these ships faster than Poseidon can destroy them. And for the next 7 years, Hera lays every obstacle, takes every opportunity to try and destroy the small ragtag fleet. And Venus upsets and frustrates her plans every single time. And she does it indirectly. She never fights her head on. She recruits the help of other people. She seduced Queen Dido into believing that Aeneas had fallen in love with her and that they were married, when in fact they weren't. And it culminated in Queen Dido committing suicide. And the Trojans getting on their ships and leaving again. So there's a ruthlessness in the way that Venus executes her strategies. It involves seduction, it involves perception. To a greater or lesser degree, it involves trickery. It involves recruiting other people through whatever means necessary in order to win. not once does Hera overcome Venus. And it's a really interesting interplay. The goddess of power herself is defeated by the goddess of beauty and love, constantly frustrated. So the city of Carthage loses its queen, and Aeneas and his crew get on their ship and they leave. For the next 7 years, they struggle. They travel through constant warfare, through constant struggle and strife, through power struggles within their own group. At one stage, Aeneas even goes to the underworld, and Venus recruits the assistance of other deities to make sure that he is safe as he goes and that he's able to return. Eventually, after 7 years, they landed on the shore to the north of Carthage on a small outcrop of land, well, a very large one. And they form a kingdom called Alba Longa, which is a set of 7 kingdoms. And it prospers for almost 400 years until one of the descendants of Queen Dido in the city of Carthage decides he's going to lay waste to this kingdom purely out of revenge for what happened to his ancestor, Queen Dido. He organizes a massive army. His name is Hannibal, and he heads over the Swiss Alps, begins a siege on Rome, and it becomes Rome. These 7 kingdoms confederate and become the Empire of Rome. They fight back and force Hannibal back into Africa, and eventually they make their way to Carthage. And the order from Augustus, Caesar Augustus, is that they were to sow salt into the land so that nothing would ever grow there again, and that no one stone should rest on another stone. It takes 407 years, but the prophecy of the fall of Carthage comes to pass. Exactly everything that Hera, the goddess of power, had tried to avoid eventually manifests. Most of it through her own actions and through her own creations. Like I said, the most interesting thing about the book is at the end of the day, the struggle and the story of Aeneas is epic, and it's great. But what I had not anticipated were the tactics of Venus herself. She's cunning, she's shrewd, she's merciless, she's manipulative, and she's, when motivated, she's able to overcome the goddess of power herself. And that for me was a really, really interesting takeaway. So there's elements of power in her, there's elements of the strategy that, that Athena is famous for as well. They're all present in this one goddess. And, like I said, Hannibal, he was and this is a historical fact, Hannibal did try to lay siege, and this created the Empire of Rome as well. And that's where that story ended for Carthage. The city was destroyed. So when we look at the rulership of Venus, we're all familiar with love, romance, and affection. They've always been her purvey, her territory and things like that. And when we think about these things, when we think about them in a mundane astrology sort of way, we think about our own personal love and our experiences of love, how love feels, the tactile and the emotional side of it. But the deeper you go into Venus and the more you explore it and the more you look at the rulership of Venus, the more interesting and the more complex this becomes. And for anybody, is there anybody here who's never been in love before? Of course not. And and they say even your first love is food. When you're a kid, that's a saying that I heard that's true to me. As the first thing we fall in love with it happens on a sensory level, and then it continues to step up. We have love for our family, love for our parents, our siblings. We form love and attachment as we grow, and we're constantly exploring with this feeling. You know what I mean? But love itself, we talk about love, romance, and affection, and we tend to generalize it. But the way we experience love in our own lives tends to be a lot more complex. And it tends to be something that's constantly changing and evolving. And that's something when I think about love, romance, and affection, for me, it's an evolution. It's not a state. It's not a static state. It's something that's always evolving. Venus rules partnerships and diplomacy. So when we engage with other people, the word agape in Greek, it means friendship. It's a kind of friendship type of love. It's not an intimate type of love. And you may have this for business partners, for friends, for people you're close to, and things like that. And Venus rules that. It's all the same thing. She rules values and self-esteem. So what we place importance on and how we important we see us as a person as well at a personality level. It all falls under Venus as well. Beauty and self-care. Anytime from having a shower to applying makeup to to dressing yourself in fine clothes and things like that, that all falls under the purvey of Venus. Wealth and finances. She rules abundance. So she has a stake in wealth and finances, and we see that expressed in the second house. She rules the senses of touch and taste. And look, I submit to you that in a lot of ways she rules pretty much all of the senses. I know other gods have a particular stake in particular senses as well. But I think, and this is an interesting thing, I think about Venus. Venus, by her very nature, is connective. And I think when we say that she rules touch and taste, I think to me, when I look at that, I think of it as touch and taste being a bridge between what we touch, what we feel, what we taste in the world, and how we feel about it. So I think she rules that experience, that bridge between the two, rather than just touch and taste itself. Where you sit there, do I like that? Do I not like that? It's that whole experience. It's all attached to her. Does that feel good? Does that not feel good? That all falls under Venus. She rules the kidneys and the lower back in the body. So if people having kidney issues, lower back issues, and things like that, it's interesting to keep an eye on what's happening with Venus in their chart. And she rules Taurus and Libra, which we're all familiar with as well. Does anybody have any questions or any points they want to add, or anything they feel might have been missed in there? Anything they want to bring to the table on that? Nothing?
I have a question.
Yeah.
To which sign would Venus be cunning, shrewd, merciless, and manipulative? I've never heard those things about her, but I'm curious. Is it Libra? Because it's ruled by air.
I think in a lot of ways it's probably more complex to that. Rather than signs and things, I think in a lot of ways it's context. Crime of passion, for example, that's one part Mars, one part Venus. Maybe even two parts Venus, and even the French have a clause in the law for a crime of passion. It exists legally, you can receive a sentence for a crime of passion. And I think in certain contexts, like they say, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned as well. I think that falls under Venus too. So I think a lot of it's got to do with context, and you see it in the Aeneid again and again. She uses these tools to protect somebody. So I think that it's more than just being this constant state of sneakiness and shrewdness and things like that. It's somebody who's willing to go to whatever lengths to protect who she loves and what she does. And I think if you go through each of the different signs, with the exception of a couple, I just can't see that sort of fire and fury in Pisces. But, you'll find a different context or a different situation, whether in a house or in a sign, I think, where that energy could express. I'm not going to ask you for a story, but does everybody have a story of their own in their own life where love has driven them to do something that they normally wouldn't do, something irrational? I know, I go put two hands up for that. You know what I'm saying? So I think it depends on the context. It depends on the emotional state. And it's a completely different experience to Mars, where you see red. You know what I mean? And you just go into berserk mode and you start attacking from the gut. I think from Venus, it's something a lot more complicated than that. You know what I mean? What is it? It's a statistical. Sorry. Everything?
I was just saying that everything you said makes sense, because if Libra is in the seventh house and in the Tarot, Seven of Swords, because the air is shrewd, cunning, and manipulative. So it could be definitely, it makes sense from that, because I see Venus as Taurus as more like the female body, like the senses and touch and feel and, how you feel about your body. But the other Venus is like the relationship Venus. And she would be more. So it makes sense.
Does anybody here watch Survivor, the TV show Survivor? Has anybody ever been into that? We used to binge watch it for a while, and I remember one season they were on an island, and there was a a young man. His name was Colton. He was a young gay gentleman, and he was very, very passive and very, very soft. And he tried to group up with a group of ladies and just hang out with them and just relax and live the easy life on the beach. And as they started getting more and more involved in the strategy of the game, they started pushing him away. And at this stage, when he realized that wasn't happening anymore, he got bored. So what he did was he turned around and became probably one of the nastiest people you'd ever seen on Survivor. Within a couple of days, he had taken complete control of the island through manipulation, through bullying, through targeting particular people and directing everybody else to them for no other reason than to amuse himself. And when, I look at that, you get a sense of Scorpio and a lot of other elements of that, but there's a Venus energy to that as well too, and the way that evolved. And the only way they got him off the island was he fell sick. He had, I think his appendix was about to burst, and they had to fly him off the island. If he'd been there, he would have walked right to the end. He would have absolutely manipulated and destroyed everybody. And as Scorpio as that sounds, though, when you watch him and you see him, there's this real softness and this gentle energy about him as well. There's a massive difference. There's a massive distance between the Venus we see in Taurus down in the second house and the Venus we see up in Libra in the seventh house. And the interesting thing about Libra for me is Libra is a cardinal sign, yet out of all the cardinal signs, this one for me is the hardest one for me to get my mind around, because it's, and I've always struggled with Libra because they're promoting the idea of equality and justice and fairness, but at the same time, you see Libra's sufficiently motivated. They've got that mean girls energy about them. You know what I mean? I've seen it before. We've got quite a few Libras in our family. Our family have got very, very strong personalities. And somehow in the right context, they always seem to make it one step right above the top of the food chain when the drama happens, and there's normally a Leo up the top that's got this Venus, this Libra on the side there whispering in the air and turning them into some sort of ballistic missile. There's a great painting by the artist, the neoclassicist artist David, called Venus Seducing Zeus. And it's Zeus sitting there stoic, and there's Venus to the side of him, just touching his cheek and whispering in his ear. And for me, that's that whole energy of Libra, and that whole energy of Venus snapshotted in a particular moment, in a particular mood, in a particular situation, So, and I've seen it again and again too. Does that make a little, at least in a very long and roundabout way, sort of answer your question, Antoinette? Yeah.
Very much. Yeah, it has definitely expanded my understanding of Venus.
Like I said,
like from the point of view of justice, she wants fairness and equality. So she's going to be, stand up for herself, being cardinal too.
There's an interesting duality between who is it? It's Themis, I think, is the Titan who rules justice. Was one of the wives of Zeus. The Fates, I think, are her daughters, her children. By herself, she can only suggest. She doesn't directly influence. She creates the laws and things like that. The laws only start to have teeth when she starts to work with the goddess Nemesis. And then that's when the law becomes absolute and governing and dominant. And I think there's a Nemesis element to, especially to Libra, but also to Venus as well. I think there's a Nemesis energy that, in the right context, in the right situation, sufficiently motivated, creates a completely different animal altogether. Oh God, just look at the French. We hear stories about it all the time. Look at these Romeo and Juliet. All the great historical romantic tragedies of all time. They all have a shade of that. We see it, and the heart races every time we see it. So, does anybody else have any other questions on that? That's just my take too. But like I said, when I read the Aeneid, it really opened my eyes. She was a formidable goddess. And the most frustrating thing about her, especially it must have been for Hera, she never stands in front of you when she does it. You never see it coming, So Statistically, women in situations where there's violence in relationships, women tend to go to lethal weapons. I think it's around 80% more likely than men, that it tends to end with death, statistically. That's something I read a long, long time ago. And I mean, there's a lot of arguments where there's a difference in strength, that if a woman's going to do something like that, it has to be final. She needs to do it in such a way that, there's no retribution attached to. But I think there's some ground to explore in there too, and there's a nemesis element to that too. You know, I'm talking from the perspective of the male here. I can see Gianna; she's looking there thinking, "What the hell is he talking about?"
No, it's true. If
Oh,
a
I'm
woman
looking
is going
where
to
I
do
can.
it, she's going to do it done, 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 so that he can't get back
Exactly.
at
You
her,
can't.
because he's
Uh-huh.
going to kill her if
Yep.
she doesn't succeed.
Yeah. Yeah. But then, hey, we look at there's other Lorena Bobbitt. Remember that? You know what I mean? There's,
Hello, nothing Aries.
so, he wished he couldn't get up again after that. So, it was
Well, that was wild.
okay. And
Yeah.
I'm not building an entire case on one extreme example there, but, there was definitely a nemesis element to that. So, any other thoughts before we move on? Okay. In terms of tarot, she rules the Empress card. Um, did you want to tell us a little bit about that, Antoinette, the Empress?
Well, the Empress in the tarot, she's absolutely loving. She represents the mother, abundance and fertility and love. And anytime she comes up in a reading, she's like, I'm just winking my eye at you. It's just, she's gonna give you everything, and it's unconditional. So she's very sweet and loving.
Mm-hmm.
It's not and the Venus, the she's just the Taurus Venus. I cannot think of her as being Libra. When I think of Libra, I think of justice, like the stern female. But
Yeah.
that's what she is in the tarot. She's very
Mm-hmm.
just loving. She's Cancer almost as well.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The second card is the lovers. There's a connection to the lovers because of the connection to partnerships, to, whether they're romantic partnerships, whether they're professional or friendships and all of that sort of stuff. Did you want to tell us a little bit about the lovers, Antoinette?
Which lovers?
The card.
Oh, you mean the love Venus and the love? Not really. I mean, it's funny because I was thinking the other day about the tarot. It's just a lot of the names that they put to the cards are not really what the cards mean. It's like a trick to fool
Yeah.
you, so that if you're going to read superficially, you're going to talk about love. But
Yeah.
it's anything but. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
about making the right decisions, I believe, and knowing, being able to discern and to know
Yeah.
how to make a decision. But when you see the naked body, it's like, like, I don't care. So
Yeah.
it's a trap.
Exactly. Exactly. And a lot of it's about polarities. It's about trust versus the self. It's about, it's the tightrope all of us walk, especially when it comes to love. We're going to explore that a little later too, and take a deeper look at that. But yeah, I absolutely agree with you too. I think the word is in many ways misleading, and the tarot is very, very successful at doing that. But then it's in a lot of ways like astrology, it's experiential. The way that you experience this card when you're 18 is going to be different to the way you experience it when you're 50. You know what I mean? Because you would have taken a journey. Yeah, you would have taken a journey in that time, and this card would have reinvented itself and reinterpreted itself multiple times before you get there.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah.
Because you're associated with Gemini
Yep.
and the third house
Yep.
and your family and your siblings and
Yeah.
your soulmate. And then your soulmate can be anybody. It doesn't have to be a love partner, but it's like different levels of the lovers.
Yeah. Yeah. And how we experience love, and one of the most interesting things is what we're prepared to give to have that love, because at the end of the day, in order for love to really, really be love, there's the transactional element to it, which brings it back to commerce in a way. You know what I mean? We have to give something in order to receive something, and everything needs to be just right in order for there to be balance and equality in that. So it's a very, very complicated card in that regard, you know.
It is,
But
and that's funny. That's funny you should mention that, because today I was just walking on the road and I was thinking,
yeah,
and that you can't be in a relationship and see it as unconditional, because
yeah,
it has to be some give and take. I mean, if I'm going to love my partner unconditionally, then it doesn't matter whatever he does.
yeah.
If he's with 5 different women, but
Mm.
only a mother can love unconditionally, or mother, or a relationship that does not have any, because it's transactional. What can I tell you? We have to come to an agreement.
For
It's
sure, for sure.
Saturn in that
But
way.
it,
If
but
not,
even a mother's going to kick
um,
your ass if you're going in a bad direction, isn't she? And she'll do it out of love. So, she won't have any hesitation at all in dropping the hammer if she needs to, because that's part of the role and that's part of love, you know.
that's
So
true.
it is true. Probably more often than not, when you get into the end of your teens, you're fighting your mother harder than you're fighting anything else in life, you know.
That's your Venus in Capricorn.
Well, I know I'm not the only one. I know I'm not the only one. So,
Yes, like we have rules here.
that's right, and as long as you're under my roof, you're not going out dressed like that, you're not seeing him, all of that sort of stuff. That's love. That's another form of love, that's a mother's
Yes.
unconditional love as rules. So, and the third card, as
Yes.
you pointed out before too, is justice. She also rules justice. In a way, when you look at these three cards next to each other in order of occurrence, they tell a story. And at the end of the day, this is like if you were looking at this as a scale, then this is the fulcrum of the scale. This is the center, the Lover's card. So in order for there to be, and we've just been discussing this, in order for there to be equity in a relationship, there needs to be a degree of compromise, and there needs to be, we need to have our needs met at the same time. So these three cards together tell a story all of their own, and I think the Lovers is at the center of that. But as we pointed out before too, there's a whole world of difference between the energy of Libra and the energy of Venus and Taurus. There's a whole spectrum there. Yeah. Okay. Definitely. In esoteric astrology, I'll just move through this quickly. Venus is seen as in esoteric astrology as the harmonizer of mind and soul. Is anybody familiar with the term the antikarana? It's the link between this life, this body, and the soul. It's they call it the rainbow bridge, and a lot of people who meditate are working on the process of building this antikarana. It's antikarana. It's building a connection to the soul self, and Venus rules that. She rules the heart chakra. In esoteric astrology, when we evolve in earlier lives, we were working from the lower chakras, but as we evolve, the energy moves from the lower chakras up into the higher centers. I think for the heart chakra, I think it's the energy of the solar plexus moves up into the heart chakra. So, in solar plexus energy, we're all about our own selfish desires, our astral selves, being lost in our own illusions about things like that. And that over experience and time, and I think, through pressure and heat and, evolution, that moves up into the heart chakra and it becomes more universal and it becomes more wiser, I guess. And in esoteric astrology, Venus is connected to wisdom. They call it a love wisdom planet. So like we were talking about in the first point, it rules soul connection, it rules the antikarana, it rules our connection with the soul too. And a big part of that is universal love. It's the concept of universal love. It's seen as an energy that is in all things. Love is in all things, and it's a law. There's the law of attraction, as they call it, where all things are attracted to one another. In a way, you look at it as even science talks about it as the law of entropy, that everything becomes higher and finer. As it evolves, there's a finite amount of energy in the universe, but it becomes higher and finer as the universe evolves. In a lot of ways, the law of attraction and universal love talks about that in a spiritual way. Did anybody have any questions about that? I know I moved through that very, very quickly, but I just thought, that was worth putting in there. And again, too, it ties back to the wisdom
No,
aspect.
it was easy to understand.
Yeah, yeah.
Easy to understand because Venus in Taurus is fixed and she receives. So it
Yes.
makes sense that she's connected to the law of attraction because she will attract.
Yes, yes, yes. And also it governs that all souls are connected to one another, that and the law of attraction guides spiritual evolution. It draws everything back to the source, to a spiritual source. So as we move through multiple lifetimes and so on, we may go in any direction, left or right, but we're always moving towards the source. We're always evolving spiritually. And that's governed by Venus. It's governed by the law of attraction. So we're all returning and attracted to a source there. Did you have your hand up, Gianna?
I have a quick question about
Yes.
the rainbow, that rainbow bridge and how Venus is ruling that
Mm.
duality between the physical and your soul. So, what is her relationship with Mercury in that sense? Because I always thought that Mercury is also like kind of ruling the interdimensions, like how we talked about a couple of weeks ago.
It's
So,
oh, you're talking like from a
yeah.
psychopomp point of view, like a guide for liminal bridges and so on from that point of view.
Yeah, or like is there any connection with Venus and Mercury on within like esoteric astrology philosophy? Like how there's this duality between your soul and your physical body, but then also the interdimensions and your movement and interdimensionally.
That's a really, really big question you're asking. One of the things from an esoteric point of view, and I'm not pushing a particular doctrine. I'm not saying I'm 100% invested in it. There's a lot of elements of esoteric astrology I'm attracted to, but other ones that just seem a bit extreme for me. One of them is that we're in a constant state of evolution. So we first evolve as a physical being in densest matter, and then we move through the emotional self, the mutable cross they call it. And then we start to, once we begin the mastery of our emotions and moving the energy up to the heart chakra, then we start to move with the mind. And then it's the mind that connects to the soul. So the Antakarana is linking the mind and the soul. We've already got a degree of mastery over our physical selves. And somebody may be manifesting at that level, thinks in physical ways, sees the world in physical dimensions. The people who, if you can't see it and you can't touch it, it doesn't exist. Um, from that point of view, I think Mercury, if you have a look at it, there's a lot going on in esoteric astrology. They talk about ray energy. There's different types of rays which express different types of energy. It's like a prism effect of light striking a prism and breaking up into different rays of energy. How many rays there are, there's endless dispute about this as well. And this is, I guess, why I'm reluctant to approach that particular question, because even when I did the esoteric astrology course, I found Nicholas Mipolos and asked him to provide a lesson just on how Reiki sees the rays. It's very, very different to the way esoteric astrologers see it. Um, so Mercury is definitely involved in the process as well, especially when you start working with the mind more and coming from the mind. It assumes there's a degree of emotional mastery in order for that to happen, and Mercury is definitely involved in that process too. But Venus is connective. At the end of the day, it's the different types of energy we're talking about. So the connection between the mind and the soul, as the esotericists describe it, and as even Kundalini talks about the Antikarana, is two different. It's like lightning. It's energy coming from the soul towards the mind, and it's from the mind towards the soul, and they meet roughly in the middle, and that's how the bridge is built. And I think that probably encapsulates the energy of Venus. It's attractive energy. It's energy that closes loops, that meets in the middle. Do you know what I'm saying? Does that sort of both answer and avoid your question at the same time?
No, it definitely does. It's sort
Yeah.
of like emitting different energy, but also still connecting with your higher self.
Yeah, yeah. And the more I work with Venus, especially even just when I sit here and try to put this presentation together, the more Venus energy is meet in the middle energy. for me. You know what I mean? It's poles meeting at a central point. And there is a law of attraction. They're attracted to one another. It creates an intention in these two opposites in order to meet in the middle, and it creates something completely different. Like the yin and the yang. It's the yin and the yang. The symbol is the barge pole. It's that line between the black and the white. It's not the black. It's not the white. It's the line between the two. It's both, and it's neither at the same time. It's something completely different. And I think that's Venus energy. When we talk about it. And it's so fragile. We talk about it all the time, and it's always changing. So it's a juggling act. It's something you've got to carry, at least at a personality level. I think once we've got a degree of emotional maturity and spiritual growth behind us, it becomes less of a challenge to carry. But at the same time, we're also attracted to people who kind of have the same maturity as well, too. I was watching a really interesting podcast a while ago, and the guy who I was watching talked about how we attract people at our emotional age. They're not necessarily exactly the same as us. Whatever traumas they're working with or experiences they've had are not the same as us. We're just, in terms of years, we sort of tend to attract people at the same level of us. And a lot of relationships stop working when one person grows up faster than the other person does. And that was something interesting for me to sit with and think about. But in a way, that describes Venus energy as well. When we're no longer getting what we need off the other person, we're unable to provide that for that other person, then things start to become stale pretty quick. Does anybody else?
And I just have one last thing to say. As I was listening to you, I realized that Venus does have a connection with the underworld because of Persephone, because of Psyche and Eros.
Yeah.
And because Psyche means soul, and she fell in love with Cupid. So, and she had to go to the underworld, and so did Persephone. So Venus does have a role that she plays, and she goes where Mercury goes. So you could be well right about that, Gianna. In different ways, but she has a connection with down below as well, I think.
But what you're also saying too is that love exists at all levels. It exists in the underworld just as it does on the surface. Just as it does in Olympus. You have the stories of the gods all the time. It's a universal binding energy that's available to everybody at any level of evolution. Even the dead to a degree have love. So it impels them. It moves them forward. Who was it? Orpheus who went down.
Oh yes, here it is.
Yeah. And even Aeneas went to the underworld, and it connected to, he went to the underworld to meet Queen Dido, actually, who had led to her suicide. So, it's a complicated book in that regard.
Queen Dido, never heard about her. I'm right. I must Google her.
Yeah, she's one of the great tragic figures. Yeah. I think, and Hannibal's, his family, those names you see turn up in British aristocracy all the time. So, yeah, they've had a great influence on classical literature and history and so on. Yeah, so love exists at all levels. And we negotiate it, we talk about it, we're drawn to it, we follow it, we're doomed by it, all of that sort of stuff. But love by itself exists. You know what I mean? It exists in its own state, in this constant state everywhere, and we're drawn to it. And this, in a way, backs up what the theosophists and the esotericists are saying, that love is a universal energy that binds all things and holds the universe together. Okay. Venus in a sign. So Venus puts the sense in sensual, and even that word in itself has a lot of different connotations. It's funny, when you're 13 years old or 15 or 18 and you see the word sensual, it means something completely different to you again to what it does when you're 50 years old. When in a lot of ways we experience love when we're young is very physical, it's very emotional. It's something we feel with our senses and our touch. It makes our heart beat faster. In a lot of ways that energy is addictive. You know what I mean? Later on in life, our criteria for love is a lot simpler, I think. And when I say this, I'm even oversimplifying now because everybody's had their own experiences. Love changes, love evolves. A lot of people talk about how your first love is probably your most powerful love, and in many ways, sets in motion a sequence of events through your life that you're constantly comparing to. You know, it becomes a benchmark in a lot of ways, how we first experienced love for the first time. And that, in a way, you know, is the first note on the evolution of love and how we experience it. Would people agree with that? You know, that how we experience love through a lifetime and how we experience the word sensual, how love appeals to our senses, evolves and changes as our own evolution happens, as we've had our hearts broken and we've met other people and we've had other experiences and things like that. Does that sound right? Or does anybody have a completely different take on that? Yeah. Okay. This is interesting, and Venus rules our attachments to others. And we see this in the Lovers card, but even then when we were talking about that card, we were already talking about how complicated that attachment is. And in a lot of ways, that word attachment's got a negative connotation to it. When we hear the word attachment, we think of over-attachment. We think of like a chain that connects us to another person for better or for worse, you know, that we can't work with. Yeah. Did you want to say something, Antoinette?
Yes, because you said attachment and immediately thought Libra, because Libra
Yeah.
gets a bad rap. They say that they're codependent because, but then you remember that Barbra Streisand, people need people,
Yeah.
that song. So, you know, and the only thing that the Venus from Taurus needs is herself.
Yeah.
Because if
Yeah.
you don't have self-love, you can't go to be in a relationship with anybody else. So that's
Yeah.
why Taurus comes first and then Venus and then Libra after.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the gateway into the higher of the seven. You know, the upper hemisphere is Libra. It's attachment to others. It's being able to get over ourselves and start working with other people. You know what I mean? You're absolutely right. You know, during the Cold War, I heard there was an experiment Russian scientists did on orphan babies. They deprived them of touch, didn't give them touch. They all died. They all died. They physically had a shriveling effect within the body. When you hug somebody, I think it's after 20 seconds, the brain starts to release oxytocin. We start to create a connection, an emotional connection to that other person. We do it enough times, then that person becomes extremely important to us. And it happens on a chemical level. It's something that happens within us. And there's other chemicals involved, dopamine, endorphins, all of that sort of stuff. But right up the top, oxytocin is the most potent. That's why when a mother gives birth, the doctors or the nurses give the baby to the mother straight away. So that process of creating oxytocin can begin.
Yes.
You know, when it first happened, they probably didn't know that's what was happening at a chemical level, but they could see the results. They could see the mother bonding to the baby and the baby bonding to the mother, and that happens straight away. And that's the thing. You're right. Libra gets a bad rap for their attachments to other people, but at the same time, we're talking about something at a level, at a chemical level. That's happening within the brain, that's happening in the gut, that's happening straight away. That's crucial to life or death. You know, there's those Russian monsters during the Cold War proved. You know, if we don't have physical contact and connections to other people, we shrivel up and die. That series on Netflix about the Unabomber, he got really, really sick when he was a boy at the time when he should have been creating that oxytocin and those bonds to his parents and to his siblings and the people around him. Starved of it, never got it. You know, and that's one extreme case. We can't build a you know, a statistic out of that. But you know, you can see how that could possibly be a factor in why he turned out the way that he did. You know, so that's the interesting thing. And like we were talking about, that word attachment itself seems to get a negative rap. The reason I think that word gets such a negative rap is attachment is hard. Creating is very, very difficult. Because it requires the cooperation of other people. At a logical level, attachment and rights are exactly the same thing. If the other person doesn't accept that you have rights, those rights do not exist. You know what I mean? It requires the cooperation and the goodwill of the other person in order for rights to exist. And rights are right at the core of the American Constitution when it comes to, you know, the justice system. It's right there. They're exactly the same thing. So that's an expression of that right up at a national level, you know, at a legal level. You know, we are codependent on one another in order for our legal system to exist. So And so when we see the word attachments, again too, it's like sensual, it's like love, beauty, beauty and love, which we talk about with Venus. But when you really start to explore the planet Venus, it's a very, very complicated and very subtle sign. And what it is to you today is not the same as what it will be to you in 5 years' time. It may not even feel the same way tomorrow. You know what I mean? Because we don't have absolute control of that experience, especially when another person's involved. What's that song by Aretha Franklin? Today I sing the blues. Last night we were in love, but today I'm on my own. And I don't know why it keeps turning out this way. But it does. So that's a Venus
There's
experience.
another one. There's another one. No money,
Yeah.
no love. We
Yeah.
used to sing.
Yeah, that's right. So in order for Venus to, and I think that's why attachment gets the bad rap that it does. So many bad life choices are attached to that word. You know what I mean? Um, Something interesting I heard is imagine a sliding scale. At one end, we've got authenticity. That's us at our most authentic selves, where we listen to our instincts, we listen to our gut, we do what we believe is right, regardless of what other people think or what other feedback is happening or what the crowd wants to do. We stand true to our own principles, and we're unshakable and unmovable in that regard. And then at the other end of the scale, we've got attachment. It's a willingness to work with other people. It's a willingness to trust other people, to open ourselves up to other people, because we believe by doing that, we create better opportunities, better connections with people. We create a better world by doing that. And if we look at these two as a sliding scale, complete opposite ends from each other, you start to get an idea why love can be so complicated. The better we are at being by ourselves and listening to our own authenticity and being faithful to that, probably the poorer we become as love partners. We become less attractive to other people, or we become more intimidating and more difficult to work with other people. We're less likely to compromise and to open ourselves up to other people. Yeah, would that sound right? Because we're so self-sufficient. We don't need love. We don't need other people because we've got everything that we need in ourselves. Yeah. So, and then at the other end of the scale, we have people who see attachment as, the way that they want to live, that they want to be connected to other people. They want to have healthy relationships with other people. And it takes a completely different type of strength and able to live in that space. And I think, because there's so much room for failure. When you do this, you're relying on other people and the goodwill of other people in order for this to work. So, in many ways, it's it's built for failure, especially if we're bringing our own baggage and things like that. When you look at these two, they tend to be two polar opposites, and at any given time, we're along a sliding scale between the two of those. And a lot of us don't even have a choice. When you're growing up, you might have had an alcoholic or an abusive parent. So what you wanted and who you wanted to be didn't matter. You were either bullied or forced to become somebody by somebody else, or you had to constantly put your own needs aside to look after this other person all the time. You know what I mean? So you're already, before you knew it, and before you even know why, you're already so far up on the attachment end of the scale that your own authenticity has suffered. You go out later in life, you have difficulty saying no to other people. You find other people who are similar to this person, who are abusive, who make us feel the way that we do, because that's what we've created attachment on. Or we grow up in relationships where our parents were never home. Japanese have a word for it. There's a whole generation of Japanese who've grown up without parents. And so they've grown up raising themselves. They eat by themselves every night and so on. Sorry, what was that, Gianna?
Oh no, I don't want to cut you off. I just have a question when you're
Yeah.
finished.
Okay. So what I'm saying is, when we start life, we're somewhere on this sliding scale. Maybe you had supportive parents who wanted you to develop your authenticity, never said no, and probably the less they said no, the more spoiled you got, maybe. You know what I mean? The more difficult you became for other people to deal with. And so you've become this extreme. And I think in the early part of our lives, in the early part of our emotional maturity, we're sliding along the scale trying to figure ourselves up. We're either in the attachment camp or we're in the authenticity camp. But I think once we reach a certain emotional age, and it tends to happen later on in life, you start building both. You know what I mean? You don't look at it as an either or proposition. You start thinking, okay, well, I've learned this enough about myself to know this is true. I've learned enough about life to know I'm not going to put up with this shit anymore. So I'm going to put boundaries here. And, especially after a very difficult breakup, you'll do that. But then you find the more rigid you are, the less attractive you are to other people, and either that or you're killing opportunities before they even start because you're seeing all these little red flags popping up. Somewhere along the line, you start to figure out, a healthy relationship has a healthy amount of little red flags. They're part of the deal. You know what I mean? And you need to learn to live with that in order to be that. You can't just walk out every time this happens and so on. So I could see Antoinette laughing. So
What a flag.
been there, done that. Okay. And so you start to grow your authenticity and your attachment in a healthy way. And I think that's once you reach an emotional level of maturity, that's how we evolve. We're doing both rather than it being an either or deal. You know what I'm saying? And you'll see this in your clients when they come. You can see where they're at, whether they're either or they're starting to develop both at the same time. Will absolutely dominate the whole narrative if you're reading when it happens. So that's just my theory. But I think when we look at this and we look at Venus, we're definitely looking at the attachment end of that spectrum. And Mars, we're probably looking at the authenticity end of that spectrum. So we talk about Mars and Venus. I know there's Mars women out there. I know there's Venus men out there. I think now this millennial generation, there's more Venus men than there's ever been before, and more Mars females, as gender becomes less of a thing. That's just my take as a Gen X. I can't really tell what the hell's going on. But you know what I mean? That's my personal take. And, when I look at Venus, like I said, Venus is on the attachment side of that spectrum. What question did you want to ask, Gianna?
When thinking about the attachment, especially as it relates to Libra, as Libra is an air sign, and then I think of attachment as something that's very rooted in something. So would you say that a sort of a Libra Venus is evolving into as they evolve the attachment, so that more grounded and rooted energy is becoming less and less, and they're kind of stepping more into that air element?
I think our attachment to, let me put it this way, children, when they're growing up, a lot of them tend to get hung up on the idea of fair. That's not fair. People, when they're older, they talk about fairness in the world and things like that. And they attach to the concept of fair as a driving force in the choices they make. And the way, especially you hear the word fair come up when they're talking about what other people do. So they're applying this air concept about the way the world should work. And more often than not, when somebody uses the word fair, it's because they feel the way they've been treating it's not fair. You don't really hear the word fair when people are getting what they want. Yeah. And I think that's got a lot to do with it. I think when you're working with other people, I don't think there's ever a luxury to be grounded or to decide exactly who and what you want to be as soon as you start involving another person in the equation. Because you only ever have a 50% shareholder in the relationship at best, if it really is a fair and equitable relationship. And I think at the end of the day, it's being able to accept that premise that is the deciding factor in that. Does that sort of make sense? It's not something that you can sit there and emotionally say, well, and everybody does this, I love it. Sometimes you hear, like you watch these dating shows, not that I do, but they say, so what are you looking for in a partner? Oh, he's got to be handsome, he's got to be rich, he's got to be funny, and all of these, and they go down this massive shopping list of all the qualities that they're looking for. You're not describing any single human being. You know what I mean? And if he existed, he probably wouldn't be interested in this woman in the first place. But you know what I'm saying? So we all have our ideas of what we want. Who we tend to end up with is a completely different animal altogether. In a lot of ways, that reflects us. So in a lot of ways, and you'll see this, Venus rules mirrors. That's one of the things that she rules. You know, when we think of a mirror, we think of Venus standing in front of a mirror and looking at herself, you know, the narcissist Venus that we saw in the Botticelli paintings and so on. But she's also a reflection of who we are through the eyes of other people. And other people are also a reflection of who we are in ourselves, our emotional age, our foibles and our weaknesses, our fears, all of that sort of stuff. They all come up and they all trigger and they all interact with this other person. Love is a contact sport at the end of the day. You know, it's not tennis. It's something that happens with another person, and even partnerships. The best thing with partnerships is the variables tend to be a lot simpler. You know, at the end of the day, we're looking for a business partner who's motivated, who works hard, who wants the same things that I want, and who I can work with. You know what I mean? They tend to be the backbone of a lot of those dialogues, and where we start looking, you know, and then we start looking at the finer details, like what do they know, what experience have they had, and all of that sort of stuff. All of that stuff can be created in time, and we understand that. Relationships are a lot more intimate because it's not just the deal. With a business partnership, we're looking at the future. When we're in a relationship, it all comes, all the baggage of the past. Everything else, all our weaknesses, all our fears and insecurities, they all come to the table. And if, you know, when you meet that person for the first time, you meet their library, their ambassador. But as the relationship starts to take root and happen, or even our perception of what a relationship is, you know, it may or may not gel with what the other person has. And then it's a process of negotiation. And I love the statement I heard that negotiating begins when somebody says the word no. You know, that's when the relationship really starts to happen. You know, where you start to have conflict and things like that, and how you navigate that. Does that at least answer your question, Gianna? I don't think it's really something you find in yourself. I think it's really about how you're willing to approach and work with and negotiate with other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. So Venus rules attachment to others, connections to other people, and transactions with other people. It's all bundled up into the same package. And we've really explored and talked about that. Like I said, in the last one, we look at the esotericists. It rules attachments and connections. And when we first looked at what Venus rules, it looked pretty simple on, you know, when you look at it on the side of the box. But when you open it up, it's a different animal altogether. It's more of a Pandora's box, you know, than just cornflakes, you know. So, yet for some stupid reason, we keep doing it. So, I don't know. What's that about? She rules values and self-esteem. And when you look at attachment and the way we negotiate and develop and grow attachment, values and self-esteem just seems a given. How we perceive ourselves, how we perceive our own worth, how we perceive the way we stack up against other people, where our boundaries are, where our lines are, where our concession points are, where we're willing to give ground to other people, all of that stuff, it's all tied into values and self-esteem. When our values or our self-esteem are low, we're prepared to give a lot to get attachment. And like I said, that may be that child who grew up in an abusive household. And they find themselves in abusive relationships because their need for attachment probably wasn't satisfied when they were at a young age. So they're prepared to compromise themselves in order to create attachments to other people. They see it as a prerequisite. You know, it's something that they've got to do. Did you want to add to that, Antoinette?
Yes, I think that's a lot of ways that we were brought up to please others, you know, to be of service and acts of service and show that you love me and bring me a coffee. So we go overboard when we go into relationships, and then we get easily used, you know. So so it's like or the narcissist or the empath, you know, going overboard. And because one of the things when you said about the mirror, because Venus, she's always shown with the mirror because that's her symbol. But it's really also so that she can get to know herself, because the only way to get to know yourself is by looking at yourself in the mirror.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you know who you are and you know your worth, you know, then you can stand your ground when somebody wants to take that from you.
Yeah.
And you don't give it over to somebody because you already know who you are. But when we're not taught to do that, we're saying, no, that's being vain.
Yeah.
But, you know, but it's
Yeah.
necessary.
Oh, it's
Yeah, it was,
absolutely vital.
it's true. And I understand, yeah, that thing about be nice and don't say no, you know, and kiss the person who's come to see you and all this kind of foolishness.
Mm.
I just want to just was that's just what I wanted to say about what you were saying. So
Oh, look, I completely agree with you, but something I would just want to add there too is, the more authentic you are, a lot of people look at authenticity as it's just not taking other people's shit at the end of the day. But I believe the more authentic you are, the less threatening it is to you to cooperate and to have concessions with other people. When somebody comes up and says something nasty to you, you don't take it on because you're already comfortable enough with them yourself and centered with yourself. When you're in a relationship and your partner wants you to do something that you don't want to do, or they're doing something that you don't like, well, it's not the end of the world. You don't look at it and look at yourself and think, well, am I getting what I want out of this relationship? Is this person worth what I'm worth? What I think I'm worth, and things like this. I think you become less agitated by the behaviors of other people as well. You know what I mean? And you're more willing to give, more willing to sacrifice and things like that because you don't feel like you're losing yourself while you do it. You know enough about yourself to know it's costing you nothing. And you're actually building something with another person too. And I think that's another level. Like I said, I think, we look at these two poles, and in the early part of our life, we're sliding, choosing, which end of the spectrum I want to be. We tend to be one. And then when we have that peak bad experience, we swing to the other. Oh, I'm not doing that again. I'm not putting up with that shit again, and all of this sort of stuff. But then when we land somewhere in the middle with this, I think that's the goal. We start to grow both equally, and
healthy boundaries, right?
exactly. But that's looking at it from the authenticity, and at the same time too, in order for us to grow, we need to enlist the cooperation of another person who's willing to grow with us. So we need to provide something that's going to allow them to grow too, and we have to be willing to take that work on, and it is work. It is work, or it can be. It can be exhausting. It can be maddening. But we need to be willing to take that work on. And we need to be able to take it on in a non-threatening way that makes us feel like we're not diminishing ourselves by doing it, or we're not losing out. And a lot of the time, when that's happening to us, it's happening in our own minds. Oh, I'm being used, I'm being taken for granted, and all of this. And then so we break this relationship up, and we go and meet someone else who's an absolute bastard. You know what I mean? And you realize, wow, maybe he want, you suddenly, 3 months later, you're looking up this person's profile on Facebook, seeing what they're up to, you were before. Are they in a relationship? I don't know. So, there has to be, I think, authenticity. In order for really to be authenticity, needs to have a willingness to compromise built into it. Because compromise in a way where you realize you're not compromising yourself. You're just giving a little ground so that the other person's got room to grow into.
Exactly. It's like the sun in Libra has to learn that, not
Yeah.
to, like, it's in exile, so you have to forget about your ego, but you
Yeah.
you can't lose your identity.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
you're
you're
there
right.
because of who you are.
Yeah.
You know.
The sad thing is, the more we talk about this, the more I realize why I probably don't understand Libra. So I've got some growing up to do in that regard. Uh, they're already there to learn that lesson.
I'm talking about this. I'm talking about my little list here.
Okay.
The regencies and the exaltations and all of that.
Yeah.
That's how I learned.
Okay. Cool. All right. So connections to others, transactions to others, values and self-esteem, it's all tied together. And that begs the question, how cooperative are we? That's what the challenge that Venus throws to us. How far are we willing to go? What are we prepared to give in order to have healthy, strong connections to other people? So Venus is not just a bag of gifts, of bonbons, chocolates, and roses sitting on the chart, waiting to be plundered. There's a lot of work attached to this planet. I guess that's at the end of the day where we're going with this. And Venus rules pleasure. the two strongest memory strands and grammatic strands that build in the brain, I understand from youth as a child, are pleasure and pain. They become the two big indicators of right at the beginning of life. They're the two strongest strands that we build in our brains. Everything else that we do in life to some greater or lesser degree either directly connects to one of those two strands or connects to something that connects to something that connects to something that's connected to one of these two strands. Otherwise, it wouldn't even feature in our consciousness. Venus rules the pleasure principle, the pleasure center of the brain. Things that make us feel good, things that make us feel wanted, loved, things that are nice, things that smell good, things that feel good, things that raise our self-esteem, things that make us go away and think, wow, that was a really lovely thing that person did for me. All of that stuff. Venus is connected to that. And what we find attractive. So what we find attractive in other people, what we find attractive in the world, around us, what we find attractive in ourselves, the qualities that, and these for many people are the hardest qualities to find. It doesn't matter what other people tell you, you just, you don't believe them. So, Venus rules what we find attractive as well. Does anybody want to add to this list or have any points they want to raise about anything that's come up?
Would you also say
No, I
that
just
Venus? Sorry, go ahead.
Go, Gianna.
go ahead.
Would you also say that Venus represents how you show up in relationships?
Yeah, I think it's it's all part of that connections to others. When you say how you show up, though, are you saying what baggage you bring, what willingness all that sort of stuff, how willing you are to do the work, all that stuff, that sliding scale? Is
Sort
that
of
what you mean?
like, yeah, or maybe your archetype in a relationship, like what kind of partner you are
Yeah. And what sort
in
of
your
partner you're
partnerships
attracted
and
to?
friendships.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
because at the end of the day, relationships at a reductionist level are negotiations. They are transactions. You know what I mean? That are constantly happening. They're business partnerships that are happening at an emotional level. And we need to bring something to the table in order for negotiation to begin. We need to have some sort of value, something of value to trade to that other person. Like I said, I'm talking at the most base level here. And Venus rules that, rules money and wealth, all of that sort of stuff. So we have to have something to bring to the table in order for negotiations to begin. Yeah. Does that answer your question, or do you mean it in a different way?
No, definitely. That
Okay.
answers it.
All right. Cool. Did you want to say something, Antoinette?
No, I just wondered if we had time to just have a quick run about Venus and the signs or the houses or something, or talk about, it's four of us tonight. Anyway, we don't have a lot of time.
Okay. Well, let's push forward. So Venus aspects. So this, at least we're starting to approach some of that. Venus
Great.
conjunct another planet. Venus beautifies whatever she merges with. So whatever she touches, it becomes something that we find beautiful in life. It can be something that other people find beautiful about us. But whatever Venus is conjunct, close to, she injects beauty into, or she finds an appreciation for beauty for. So that's one of the ways that, probably the most powerful way that Venus energy expresses in a conjunction. When Venus is sextile something, we see opportunities for beauty. We see opportunities for harmony. There's already an interest in that part of our life. There's already a flow of energy that's moving that way there. And with a bit of work, with a bit of effort, with a little bit of concession, and a willingness to show up, as you put it, there could be great rewards to be found in that particular part of life. And we're attracted to it. That's the Venus is all about attraction. Venus trine is an attraction energy. It's an attraction to beauty. It's an attraction to the beauty in whatever we're looking at, or a willingness to find it. It's something that's happening all by itself. It tends to have a healthy flow of harmonious and beautiful energy. And maybe it's just me, but I think you see that energy in Libras as well. They tend to radiate a beauty about them too. Beauty is important, and that energy, that energy we're talking about, attraction, beauty, all of that sort of stuff, which for an air sign is unusual. And again, too, hence my, my confusion with this sign. But beauty seems to be a part of the Libra arsenal as well. I've got an aunt, she's the quintessential Libra, and her name is Shona. She moved to a very, very small town that she grew up in, and she came from the big city, and she brought all her clothes, all her makeup and things like that, and her nickname around town used to be Show Pony. 'Cause she used to dress to the nines and things like that, and everywhere she went out, and some people would laugh about her, but pretty much every woman in that town hated her, and every man in that town used to follow her around like a dog. So, you know,
Exactly. I have
it's
a friend who has Venus in Libra, and she's like that. Her hair is
yep,
always done. She's
yep,
got on lipstick. She's dressed
yep,
properly. She's got the best
yep,
manners, you know?
yes. And the look on their face, they always, she could be falling. She could, be falling with a bag of shopping, hit the bottom, and someone could take a photo of it, and it still would look like you could put it on the cover of a magazine. You know what I
Glamour.
mean? Yeah, the infuriating energy. My daughter's got it too, and it drives me and my wife
Not
nuts.
like Venus in Aries that we always have on our sweatpants and
Yeah,
running around.
that's right. So
Literally, I'm
I
in
don't know,
sweatpants
Venus.
now.
Yeah. Well, I'm Venus in Capricorn, so I don't know if I've got an old man's cardigan on or something like that. Um, Either that or a Hugo Boss suit.
Very traditional.
Well, and also power dressing too. They created the Nazi uniform. Hugo Boss.
Wow.
So they're the positive aspects. When
What
we,
about a square?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Venus square, value-based conflicts. So our values tend to be in conflict with one another. Um, when we have Venus square something out, we experience it at a values level more often than not.
I've never heard that before. You just open up my mind.
Okay.
Value-based conflicts. Thank you.
Well, that's the thing too. As we're going through, and we've been looking at this right from the beginning when we first started looking at the Aeneid. There's an incredible pragma to Venus as well. You know what I mean? Um, we're not just born beautiful, and a lot of the times being beautiful takes a lot of work. You know, you look at these magazine models and things like that. They got whole teams of people. Their whole professional career is to make this person beautiful. That's what they do. Their bread and butter, their income is all based on their ability to be beautiful. And there's a lot of work that happens in the back in order to make that happen too. But like we were talking about before, when you look at Venus from a non-self-centric point of view, we start looking at it as transactional, as involved in relationships, then our own self-esteem is tied into it, and our own sense of who we are and what we're about, what we believe, and especially how far we're willing to go in order to get the things we want, what we're prepared to give up or compromise, is all tied up in all of that. And I think when you look at a Venus square on a chart, you start to see that to come through. Um, there's an unhealthy but a powerful pattern there. This may be the actual point on the chart where they're surrendering personal power all the time. They're willing to denigrate themselves, at least at this stage of their emotional evolution, in order to get what they need. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Venus opposition, opposing desires. It can be, desire. And again, too, we talked about this right from the beginning. It could be at the most fundamental level. It could be the desire to be authentic and be true to ourselves, and the desire to be attached and in love with somebody else. Like the sort of love that you see in a movie, in Love Actually or something like that. They could be in conflict with each other all the time. You know what I mean? And the way we are maybe and one may prevent the other from being true, by constantly being a people pleaser. It was interesting bit of feedback I heard. A lot of people who got multiple sclerosis. There was a psychologist who went and gave a talk to them. He found one of the most common things was people with MS have an inability to say no. They don't have boundaries. They're very hard saying no to other people and things like that. And when he spoke to this group, they all said, yeah, that's exactly right. One woman, he talked to her and to about going outside right now to the ATM, taking all her money out and giving it to him. She just couldn't say no. he went and saw their GPs, and the people who at the labs, sorry, not the GPs, but the people who do analysis to work out whether a person has a MS or not, and they all agreed. They said, yeah, the people who come in for their MS diagnoses are the nicest people you'll ever meet. They don't want to be trouble for anybody. And things like that. And he established that that was a route, a possible route for multiple sclerosis. And that could be something that you see manifesting in a situation where you have a square on the chart, Venus against the square another more powerful planet, or something like that, that stops the person from saying no. A more dominant planet that's overriding their own intentions and their own will. That could be an example of a Venus opposition. But it's opposing desires. And we talked at great length before, at least between the desire to be authentic and the desire to be in a relationship with somebody else. And I think a lot of that's got a lot to do. It could be somebody who's attracted to a particular type, yet that type finds them repulsive. That may be a way that a Venus opposition expresses, at least at a fundamental level. Venus quincunx. Love based on compromise. This may be a pattern where a person is easily giving ground. Either they're too willing to make compromises, or compromise is something that's always been thrust upon them and they struggle with. Not just in whatever relationship they're in right now. It could be any relationship. It could also be work relationships. It could be friendships. Things like that. A person's having to constantly evaluate where they're at in this relationship. And inevitably, they have to confront their own sense of their own personal value if they're ever to conquer this pattern that comes up on the chart. So, does anybody have any thoughts or any questions, or anything they want to say on the way these different patterns may express different aspects? No? We're good? Okay. Venus retrograde. Some of the ways that a Venus retrograde on a natal astrology chart could be the following. Somebody, introspective love something that's happening inside them. They don't express it well, and from the outside, they may seem cold, they may seem aloof and things like that, but they're constantly internalizing and evaluating love within themselves. Do I feel love? Do I not feel love? I know somebody in my life like this now, has been in a relationship with somebody for a year. Can't even say the words. Can't even say the word relationship. You catch them at the right moment, you can see all the hope in their eyes, everything lights up and things like that. But when you start dropping in words like love or relationship or things like that, they go cold straight away. They stick to their guns and say, no, I don't feel any attraction at all. And that's could be, well, I know for a fact there's a Venus retrograde there. Unconventional relationships, somebody who's looking for relationships that are outside the norm. And there's a whole spectrum of relationships here. When we talk about relationships, I guess we've got our own idea of what a healthy relationship is. And for a lot of us, for better or for worse, that picture is our parents. You know what I mean? And there's probably a lot of work that goes on in the background that as children, either we don't see because they've shielded it from us, or we've normalized because we're seeing it all the time. But in a lot of ways, at least from a Freudian point of view, the relationships that we grow up with are our perception of relationships. That becomes an important part of it. And as we talked about before, a lot of our own self-worth, our willingness to compromise, all of that can be attached to that. We find ourselves constantly moving into unconventional relationships. That word can run the full gamut. It can be anything from people with strange habits or who look strange or whatever the case may be, right through to abusive relationships that we keep looking for again and again and again, as we try and work through our own stuff. And the frustrating thing about a Venus retrograde is we tend to do it internally, which for a Venus pattern can be a fatal problem because we're never looking at the qualities of the other person. We're constantly looking at ourselves for causality and for problems, what we're doing. Why do I keep falling for this type of person all the time? But then we keep doing it again. There's no answers in that sort of question. But unconventional relationships, ones that are unhealthy, ones that sit outside the norm, Uh, Open relationships, for example, could be an example of a Venus retrograde. Somebody who has a relationship with somebody but still sees other people, and you're looking for somebody else who's not alarmed by that too. Sure, why not? And if two people can make that work, two people can do that for a lifetime. And be very healthy and very happy and still in love with each other because their concept of love is unconventional from the go-get. You know what I mean? Difficulty expressing affection. This is this is an easy go-to for this one. That person I was talking about before with introspective love definitely has a problem with this. Gives the weirdest hugs you could ever get, almost as if they're trying to avoid oxytocin. So it's all there. It's all tied up in the package too. And there's a lot of stuff there. I think they're trying to unpack as they're working with that.
I think if you look in the chat, everything is in there.
Yes. Yes.
Because I was looking at my chart and I saw in progressions that my Venus was retrograde. So
Okay.
even if it was anything could be going on the outside, but on the inside, I'm not wanting it right now.
Sure.
Or won't be until I'm 70 something. So
yeah.
Because I checked to see when it was going direct, let me tell you.
Well, you could be working on your authenticity right now. Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? Who knows?
In that
anyway.
But
everything is in the chart. Why Venus has if she has a square or an opposition, you can figure it out by looking somewhere else and understand why that is the way it is. That's why I love astrology. So
Venus is the most interesting planet in that all she has to be is in the chain somewhere. You can start with the sun and then look at an aspect to a moon, which runs off to Saturn, which goes to Venus. And just by being part of that lineup, that criminal lineup, she's affecting all of them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah, exactly. So, and at the end of the day, she tends to have the final word in that regard too, because at the end of the day, are we going to do that, or are we not going to do that? Are we going to open ourselves up for that, or is that too much trouble? All of that sort of stuff. I remember I went through a period for about a decade where I just, when I thought of relationships, I thought of all the bullshit that comes to that other person. I'm like, just no. And it's not like that at all. But at the end of the day, that told me where I was at in myself, And again, I didn't have the stamina. Yeah, I didn't have the stamina to do the work, to open myself up to another person again. I just wasn't interested. And it sounds like you've got sort of that feeling now too. So I agree with you. Venus's placement on the chart, and like I said, she's anywhere in the lineup, and she'll have her word in there. You know what I mean? It's like the Aeneid. You've got Hera offering power, you've got Athena offering peerless combat ability, but Paris is still thinking, what does the most beautiful in the world woman in the world look like? And he can't stop thinking about it, and he can't leave it alone. So I think that's got a lot to do with Venus energy, and that's why Paris chose her out of the three. He just couldn't.
Because he was immature. If he was mature, he'd have gone for the world power.
Yeah. It's probably the best and the worst.
That's why you're supposed to make mistakes when you're young.
Yeah, oh, for sure. If they'd chosen some 60 or 70-year-old man and taken him up there, Venus wouldn't have got a look in. She wouldn't have got a look in, but she got this young, good-looking prince from Troy, and that's game over. Those other two didn't stand a chance. But she tugs at completely different strings, and the worst thing is there's a wisdom aspect to it. You only get that wisdom by making those mistakes in the first place.
Right, for real, for real.
So constant values reassessment, that could be somebody with a Venus retrograde too. Their values keep shifting and evolving depending on what's going on, or what they value and what they think is important is constantly in conflict with what life's presenting them with. It's not compatible. All it's doing is it's making them feel lonely and isolated, probably. Or their heart keeps breaking all the time, or they keep getting attracted to the wrong person all the time. And the solution to the problems always seem to invariably make the worst choice, And when I think about AI, people being so terrified of AI, because it'll be closer to humans. If it goes this way, I don't think we've got anything to worry about. It'll just keep making all the same stupid choices people do. So I feel sorry for AI. So, constant. I don't
I'm
think any
gonna get
computer
this.
should have to put up with that.
No.
Constant values reassessments. Unstable finances at the pragmatic end of the scale, unstable finances, you spend all your money on stupid things, or, money comes in and it goes out just as quickly, or you can't, you have difficulty putting a price on something. You know what I mean? For us as astrologers and as light workers, it could be somebody who's constantly giving away more than they're getting back and getting exhausted by the process. Um, I mean, you're doing it all from the heart, but it's killing you at the same time. So, or you're at least very hungry. So, yeah, that could be it. Heightened senses. She rules the senses, and the way that we connect to everything else around us. And when you have a Venus retrograde, that could be amped right up. Your senses could be too powerful. Your sense of smell, your sense of hearing. I've got a terrible sense of hearing. I hear everything. Um, when people are talking, my brain's always processing every word and how they say it all the time. If I'm in a house and there's a tap dripping at night, I've got to get up and I've got to turn that thing off because I will start counting, 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 counting. So, that could be an expression of that. People
Does
lose.
does the retrograde, if you're born with a Venus retrograde, how does that connect with past life? Is that something that you come to repeat, or you don't see it like that?
If you were looking at Venus from a past life point of view, I'd be looking at Venus through a solar plexus point of view. Talking about those chakras before, from an esoteric point of view. If we've, and I'm assuming in this lifetime, probably with most planets, and maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but I don't think I've met any masters yet. I think I've met a whole lot of people who are still doing a whole lot of work. I think the one thing that brings groups like us together is we've probably been presented with more unreasonable stuff than the average person who's happily going on about their lives, doing stupid things and not seeming to pay the price for it seems to get. We all seem to be getting more on our plate, served up in a way that's less appetizing than a lot of other people. So we're constantly being presented with the challenge of how do we process that? And for many of us, we're choosing to do the work. We're choosing to do astrology. We're choosing to do tarot or other forms of divination or self-work to help understand not just what's happening with us, but also how it's happening to other people as well. We're doing the research, we're doing the groundwork and things like that. And what I'm saying is Venus in a past life probably was more from the solar plexus. There's people who walk around and they can eat what they want, they don't get fat, they can do whatever stupid choice they want, they can hurt people and then walk away and just not feel any responsibility for it at all. Narcissists, basically. I think narcissists are probably an example of how, Venus energy in a past lifetime might work and things like that. It could also explain why narcissists are brought to us in this lifetime. Because we obviously have not resolved our issues surrounding that, or we were such an effective narcissist that life, God bless, has decided to give us a narcissist all of our own to work with, and live with and struggle with, and things like that too, just so we can really get the full experience of that. So that's a way that Venus might work. But of course, once you put Venus in any sign, the lessons start to become a lot more tailored. Does that answer that question for you? Yeah?
Yes,
No?
thank you.
Okay, cool. All right. And Venus in retrograde, you may find that person who keeps looking backwards in relationships. They keep looking in Facebook, trying to find all those old partners who they went out with. Hey, what's so and so from college doing now? What's so and so from school doing? Or they talk about old relationships all the time, and or what they've had in old relationships is affecting what they've got in the now. Either they're constantly comparing what they've got to what they had, or they're so attached to what they had before that they're missing all the opportunities that are being presented to them right now.
It's funny, because before I started studying astrology, Venus retrograde was like all people come back into your life, and then when you start studying, you realize opportunity to heal.
Yeah, that's right, but it's the same thing, where the esotericists talk about, you have experiences are physical, then they're emotional, then they're mental, then they're spiritual, in that order. I have this theory at the end of the life, at the end of the day, we all have the same problems that keep presenting themselves to us in the same life. We just experience those problems on a different level. They keep coming back to us, presented, and they're the same problems presented us, and we're just experiencing them in different ways. Some of them we're getting better at dealing with. Some of them they continue to hound us and hold us down. Other ones are, we're evolving and growing because those same problems keep coming back. Eventually, there's that rhetoric, they stop being problems and they start becoming opportunities. All that, so I think that's, maybe that's a way that it works. What do you think?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, we just until we get it right.
Yeah, yeah. And the worst thing about it is, and the best thing is, Venus will keep creating those chemicals in your brain that will keep attracting you back to those problems. And that's, I think, if we take away nothing else from today, I think that in many ways is the essence of Venus. She's the one who will keep us stepping back into the fire again until it stops burning, until we get tougher skin, or we learn to love fire, we become fire beings ourselves, or we learn to control the heat, turn it down, or we just stop stepping in fire because that's just dumb, but sometimes, and that's what I mean with AI, probably the most defining thing about human intelligence is our ability to keep doing the dumb thing again and again and again. Even though at a logical level, an animal will always choose whatever increases its odds to survival. You know what I mean? Humans won't, not necessarily, you know? So, and that for me is why I think if, like I said before, if AI really, really evolves, then, God help it. So, that's
I would like a chip for discernment.
Sorry, what was that?
I would like a chip for discernment.
Yeah, that's right. But that's what
Because I'm
Venus
a
does.
Pisces.
Yeah.
Yeah. See,
If we didn't have Venus, we wouldn't be attracted to all those people that cause so many problems for us. Or we wouldn't be such a problem for other people. You know what I mean?
I never thought of it that way, but that is
Yeah,
true.
yeah. So, and in that way, and she's just a mirror. She'll just keep showing you what you're doing, like a reality TV show.
For
That's
sure.
playing 24/7, just streaming nonstop, So, yeah, that's Venus. God bless. And then the final section here, manifesting Venus. So Venus's day is Friday. So if you, we were talking last time, when we were looking at Mercury, what ways you can manifest Mercury energy is to make a small shrine or something like that. And I think, God, what was Mercury? Mercury was Wednesday. So if you want to work with manifesting Mercury energy in your life, Wednesday's Mercury day, but Friday is the day for Venus.
Yeah, the self-care day.
Yep. And shrine or altar, like we were just talking about, that's a great way to do it. Her colors are red, pink, and pastel tones, soft tones. So, anything that's got that on that, put that on that little shrine of yours. Wear those colors on a Friday and things like that. Red on a
Flowers.
Friday, oh my. So, that's a way to manifest that energy. Mirrors, anything that's heart-shaped, doves, any symbol of peace, harmony, connection, scales, all of that sort of stuff. That's all Venus energy. So put that on your shrine and just manifest that energy, bring it all in. Rose quartz, emerald, and opal, they're her stones. So keep some of
Wow,
those.
you're expert, Damien. I'm trying to write everything.
Oh, sorry. Hey, look, if anybody ever wants a copy of the PowerPoint for this, just let me know. I'll just send it to you. So, yeah.
There's so much to write, so I'm typing instead of.
I know, and this will be a video, so you can pause that anytime you want.
Yeah, okay.
But
if you're
like I
gonna
said,
make
I
it
think
available,
yeah, I think Sandra wanted the PowerPoint for the moon one. I sent that to her. She was, you're quite welcome.
oh yeah, I didn't get to come to the moon one, so I'd love that.
That's on YouTube as well. So, but I can send that to you. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Cool. Roses, lilies, and myrtle. They're her flowers, the ones that are connected to Venus. Copper is also her metal too. So copper bracelets, copper jewelry, anything that beautifies. If you've got it in copper, then wear it or put it on your shrine or your altar for Venus. And that's us, everybody. That's Venus. Did anybody have any thoughts, anything they want to say about the session, or any questions that they had, anything like that? No?
No, it's very complete. Thank you.
I found it really interesting that Venus embodies all powers of the three goddesses.
Yeah. At the end of the day, though, I think she beat Hera. Athena was smart enough to just not get involved. You didn't hear about her again in that story. She just got out of Dodge. I think she beat Hera because Venus is a mirror. She just kept reflecting everything that Hera did straight back. And she ended up blowing herself up. Just the city of Carthage, like they said in that prophecy, the prophecy came to pass. The city was absolutely laid to waste by the Romans when they went through. They absolutely ravaged that city, burned it to the ground. And I think, yeah, I don't know, and I think we kind of experience Venus that same way in our own lives. At the end of the day, maybe you never even meet the goddess at all. You just meet that mirror, that's always looking back at you, and that's the way she expresses. Because what we see in that mirror is changing all the time. How I feel about love now is so much more complete than, when I was in my teens. And that's been an evolution and a journey that I've had to go through. A real shitty one in parts. It's been really, really, really hard, but it's all paid off in the end. She eventually always beautifies in the end. So, yeah. I think that's probably how she pulled that stunt off, Gianna, how she beat Hera. Yeah. Does anybody else want to say anything? Any thoughts? Okay, well, like I said, if you want a copy of this, just send me a message in the Facebook group. I'll get the video together and upload that within the next couple of days. And I always put a copy of the video on the YouTube, in the Facebook group too. So you should see that pop up within the next 24 hours. Other than that, thank you very much for being a part of today. Thank you for your questions and your comments and your involvement and all of that stuff. It was an awesome session. So
it was. I enjoyed these sessions. Today was not a good day, but now it's fixed. So thank you.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad I've been able to do that for you, or we all have been able to do that for you too.
Yes. Okay, great. Take care, everybody. Bye.
You too.
Bye.
Catch you guys
Have a
later.
good night. Thank you.